Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really compact, but honestly incredibly powerful piece of text on human endurance called Forging the Resilience Threshold. So if you're looking to fundamentally upgrade your mental baseline, really learn how to handle adversity better, you're in the exact right place. We're going to take this deceptively simple concept and completely unpack the psychological architecture behind it. Let's get right into it.
Let me ask you something right out of the gate. Contemporary effort actually create permanent toughness? We constantly hear the exact same advice, right? Grind through the hard days, put in the work, embrace the suck. But what does that actually do to us on a structural level? Well, this whole explainer is focused on exactly that question. We're looking at that fascinating, kind of unseen conversion of short-term gritty action into long-term unshakable change. We're talking about fundamentally altering your psychological wiring here, not just, surviving a bad Tuesday.
So, the source material gives us this core directive. Build a resilience threshold. Training your state level of resilience will eventually raise your trait level of resilience. Now, I want you to look at this not just as some motivational quote to stick on your fridge, but as a literal equation. It's a psychological formula for growth, and we're going to unpack it piece by piece. Think of it like a physics equation for your mind. Action A plus variable B yields a permanent structural change in C.
Section 1. The resilience threshold.
Before we figure out the exact mechanics of how to get there, we really need to define the ultimate destination this text is pushing us toward. And that destination is a threshold. Notice the specific language the source uses. It commands us to actively build it. See, a threshold isn't just that fleeting feeling of being strong on a good day, when you got 8 hours of sleep and your morning coffee was just perfect. It's an actual barrier. It's a brand new, elevated baseline of operation. Think of it as the floor of your capabilities, not the ceiling. When you build a threshold, the absolute worst you can possibly perform on your hardest day is still higher than your old baseline. It's literally a permanent upgrade to the foundation of your psychological house. But how do we actually construct this new floor?
That brings us to Section 2, state-level resilience.
If the threshold is the macro structure of that psychological house, then this right here is the micro level. It's the ground floor where the actual building takes place. When the text talks about state-level resilience, it's talking directly about the active, in-the-moment response. Think about your state right now. It's temporary, right? It constantly fluctuates based on whatever's happening around you. Let's look at a concrete example. Imagine you hit a massive roadblock at work. Maybe a major project falls apart at the last minute, or you get an email that just completely derails your entire week. How you respond in that specific, highly pressurized moment, that is your state resilience. Are you choosing not to panic, taking a deep breath, logically tackling the problem instead of emotionally reacting to it? The text emphasizes a very active verb for this, training. You don't just magically happen to have state resilience. You actively train it through deliberate, temporary, and honestly often deeply uncomfortable effort. It's the friction of the moment.
Next up, Section 3, trait-level resilience.
Now let's shift gears for a second. Let's transition away from that temporary, micro action of the moment and look toward the macro, permanent result we're ultimately chasing. A trait is fundamentally different from a state. Trait-level resilience is your inherent, overarching baseline. It represents who you fundamentally are when you aren't actively trying. It's your default setting. While state resilience requires you to hype yourself up, take a deep breath, and consciously fight off panic, trait resilience is what allows you to wake up naturally equipped to handle that exact same stressor without the massive internal struggle. It's just who you are now. And the beautiful promise of our source text is that this permanent baseline isn't static, it's something that eventually gets raised.
Notice the stark contrast between these two concepts. Think about the state level. It's highly active, requires sweat, demands training. It's that temporary friction you experience on a daily basis. Basically, it's hard work. But contrast that with the trait level. It's inherent, it's a passive state of being, and it represents a permanent gain. You don't have to force trait resilience, it's simply there to catch you. The core insight to really grasp here is that the active, exhausting effort of your state essentially buys you the permanent, effortless stability of your trait.
Moving on to Section 4, Forging the Connection.
So, we've established the two distinct parts of our equation. Now we need to dive into the actual mechanics. How exactly do we get from that temporary state over to the permanent trait? Let's walk through the chronological journey the source maps out for us. Step 1. You train your state level. You push through that difficult, isolated moment today, managing your stress in real time. Step 2. You allow time. The text explicitly says this process happens eventually. Step 3.
That persistent repetition raises your underlying trait level, completely altering your default psychological setting. And finally, step 4. By raising that trait, you successfully build your new resilience threshold. It's just a brilliant compounding process where micro-actions scale right up into a macro reality. I want to pause for a second and isolate the magic word bridging this whole gap: eventually. Seriously, think about the immense gravity of that word. The source isn't promising a quick fix here. It's not offering an overnight hack or some easy way out of adversity. Eventually is the heavy bridge connecting state to trait. It demands absolute patience and ruthless consistency. It tells us that those isolated moments of training your state, yeah, they might feel completely disconnected, frustrating, and honestly just exhausting right now. You might feel like you're fighting the exact same battles every single day, but they're secretly accumulating. The threshold is being built in the background, totally out of sight, fueled entirely by that one word: eventually.
And the core math behind the text is really clear when we break it down. First, you have your previous trait level, your old natural comfort zone where you started before you intentionally engaged with adversity. Next, you add the active state-level training right on top of it. Those are all the difficult reps you put in daily, the deep breaths, the moments you actively chose to stay calm instead of blowing up. And finally, you get the result, a brand new elevated trait threshold. Because of your persistent training, the ceiling of your past has literally become the floor of your future. How cool is that?
So the crucial takeaway is captured perfectly when we look back at the original text one last time. Really let this sink in. Build a resilience threshold. Training your state level of resilience will eventually raise your trait level of resilience. Hopefully you aren't just seeing words on a page anymore. You're looking at the literal architectural blueprints for mental toughness. Every single time you consciously manage stress in a temporary state, you are depositing a brick. Keep depositing those bricks, day after day, week after week, and eventually, you've built a fortress.
Which brings us to our final thought, and really the most important question for you to take away from this explainer. What are you doing today to train your state and raise your threshold? Remember, your baseline is absolutely not fixed. It's waiting to be forged. The effort you put in right now, in the moment, sure, it's temporary, but the threshold you build, that's going to be yours forever. Go out and train your state today. Thanks for learning with me, and I'll see you in the next explainer.